Welcome into A to Z Sports Prime Time on a Thursday evening. Hope everybody's having a great week. You're ready to put a bow on our primetime week of work and talk about wide receivers, the pressure that one specific guy is going to be under given Treylon Burks' slow start. So we'll get into that and you'll hear from that wide receiver later on in the show. We're also going to talk about some news that broke earlier in the middle of the day, right around the time when I was wrapping up my radio show, about Nashville being one of the 6 cities in consideration for WNBA expansion. We'll talk about whether you'd rather have a basketball team or a baseball team later on tonight. We've got the weekend bounce back before we wrap things up. Speaking of basketball, you can tell us who needs to bounce back in sports this week. But first, some Titans talk to get us started on this Thursday evening. Before we get rolling, though, I need you guys to share this show on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, and on Twitch. If you are hanging out on Twitter, please retweet the show. That's in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. If you are on Facebook Live, like Raynald Cherry, you can share now to public. That's in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. YouTube or Twitch, please subscribe to the A to Z Sports channel, where you can get our live streamed coverage 7 days a week. And whenever we pop on live, you can go ahead and jump in there. And if you're on YouTube, by the way, like Derek R. or Mark Jones, rather, as opposed to who? Mike Jones, go ahead and like the video in the YouTube chat. We would be hugely appreciative of you doing so. Now that more of you are here, we can go ahead and start the show officially. Welcome into A to Z Sports Prime Time on a Thursday. I'm your host, Buck Rising. I'm proud, as always, to be presented to you by Two Rivers Ford. Two Rivers Ford, where there are certified Blue Advantage vehicles, pre-owned vehicles, available for you on the lot in Mount Juliet, one of the state's largest selections, as well as the Built For You program, which allows you to customize any new Ford, any color, with any accessories that you choose. Two Rivers Ford in Mount Juliet, or online at tworiversford.com. The Ashton Real Estate Group of RE/MAX Advantage, the official real estate agent of the Nashville Predators and of A to Z Sports Prime Time, is GaryAshton.com. Your dream address without the stress can be found courtesy of the Ashton team and the intel edge that they provide. So, Treylon Burks has had a bit of a slow start. And there's enough of a discussion at this point around how concerned to be. Now, here's the thing, and we've talked about this several times. I know Austin and Zach spent some time on it this morning as well. There is a situation with Burks where you look at it, and because there is so precious little information, you're not sure how concerned you should be, even as you've heard from Treylon Burks already yesterday. But it does create a situation where, in ways where this guy is going to be looked at and relied upon by many Titans fans to kind of take the place and fill the void that A.J. Brown is leaving behind. Well, it doesn't seem that he's physically ready for that yet, for one reason or another, the reasons specifically being unknown. But there is some reason to be optimistic about this Titans wide receiver core, even if you are not certain about the Treylon Burks experience so far. You have a couple of different options to choose from. And, talking about wide receivers specifically, we should branch this out to all skill position players. Austin Hooper and Ryan Tannehill seem to have a good connection early and often. Chigakonkwo is somebody who you can feel pretty optimistic about as far as a versatile piece to fit in with the rest of the tight end group. I think Kyle Phillips has been the most impressive rookie from this day one of rookie minicamp through these OTAs so far, and may be able to provide them production out of the slot right away in his rookie year. Then there's Robert Woods, who you consider or may not have considered to be a day one ready piece because of the ACL tear, but has been pretty active early and often. Hell, more active than Treylon Burks at this point, coming off of mid-November ACL tear, back there out on the field, the practice field where he tore his ACL not so many months ago. So all these different things where you're looking and waiting for Treylon Burks to kind of emerge, it's not happening yet. So you have to look elsewhere. And that's where I want to start with your Two Rivers Ford take. Let me know in the comment section on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. What is your biggest takeaway from Titans OTAs thus far? Whether it be Ryan Tannehill, Todd Downing, who we discussed yesterday, any of the rookies that we have talked about, the veterans now back out on the field in the last couple of weeks. What is your biggest takeaway from Titans OTAs to this point? You can let us know in the comment section on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, and on Twitch. We will discuss at length together right after I tell you about the people who make the Two Rivers Ford take possible. That is, of course, Two Rivers Ford. Two Rivers Ford in Mount Juliet has all of the things that you need, whether it be a new vehicle or a pre-owned vehicle that you are after. It's all about whatever makes the most sense for your family's budget at this point, because not only can you build your own Ford, custom order your next Ford at Two Rivers Ford with the Built For You program, but you can also get one of their certified Blue Advantage pre-owned vehicles from a dealership that you know that you can trust. Two Rivers Ford has been doing business in Middle Tennessee for nearly 40 years, since 1983. And if you're looking for a pre-owned vehicle option, you want to get it from a place that you know does business with honesty and integrity. That's Two Rivers Ford. It's been Two Rivers Ford since 1983 with their non-commissioned sales staff and quality American-made Ford vehicles and award-winning customer service. Two Rivers Ford in Mount Juliet or online at tworiversford.com. So, with all of the OTA information at your disposal, all the different videos and reports that you've seen or read, all the different things, interviews and podium press conferences, and all the different stuff that's come out of the last couple of weeks, what is your biggest takeaway from Titans OTAs to this point? Let's take a look at what you guys are saying. Buck might be in better shape than Burks, says B French. Well, no, I was listening to our friends on the Football and Other Efforts podcast. I think that was yesterday. And Zach Lyons had a pretty good line. If professional athlete Treylon Burks is fat and out of shape, what does that make the rest of us? Right? Like this guy is still a physical specimen of a human being. And while I think it is easy to pile on him right now, and you would like for the process to have gone smoother, I do still think that it is entirely premature for full-on freakouts about Treylon Burks and his conditioning, or frankly, lack thereof. Denise Moore says NWI does not need to be mic'd up. # boring. Yeah. Well, one, he may not be as boring as the video that they released would tell you, but I think they would prefer him be intentionally boring. And I'm sure there's editing to make sure that he is intentionally boring, Denise. The mic'd up things are fundamentally useless, right? They're just something that you can put sponsored content on. And, it's like I've got the game 1 of the NBA Finals on right now. And at some point, they're going to show Ime Udoka or Steve Kerr in the huddle, mic'd up for sound, clapping it up and say, got to play good. Got to play better defense, guys. Got to play better defense. Keep it together. Stay focused on the goal. Like all these useless cliches that mean absolutely nothing. The sideline reports where the coach is asked one question and gives a 2-second answer, and the mic'd up for sound in the huddle, those are the two most fundamentally useless things. But you can attach sponsors to them and make money off them. So, not entirely useless for somebody from a business standpoint. Kyle Phillips, greater than Mason Kinsey, says Donovan Romaine. Well, yeah, that is so. That is correct to this point. Now, other than the unrelenting Mason Kinsey stands, who I cannot for the life of me wrap my head around, it'll be interesting whether Mason Kinsey can find a way to continue to earn a spot on this roster or on the 16-man practice squad, because he does have experience and he has been here for a while at this point. So if he can provide you something, then that's better than nothing. But yeah, Kyle Phillips is substantially better as a player and as a prospect, as a pro prospect, than Mason Kinsey has been at any point so far in the last couple of years. Will Dodson says, I'm with the feds, LOL. Yeah, talking about Nick Westbrook Akeem is mic'd up for sound. And unfortunately for NWI, that was the only funny line to result out of that mic'd up for sound segment. Max asks, how has Des Fitzpatrick looked in your opinion? Up and down, right? But you would prefer for those inconsistencies to have already worked themselves out. I think that once we get into once we get into mini camp and we see more 7-on-7 work, we see how the secondary kind of responds and reacts because defense is always going to be ahead of the offense. I think that Des Fitzpatrick has some tools certainly, but what he is in this offense and for this football team, I'm not entirely sure yet. Lone Star Titan says Robert Woods, ready to ball out. And that's been the thing that's kind of surprised me the most is how quickly Robert Woods was ready to get out on the field. And we, in fact, spoke to Robert Woods after practice concluded yesterday.
You have the choice, first of all, to be here for OTAs, and then second of all, to rehab here as opposed to anywhere else. What made you rehab here and also choose to be here for OTAs too?
Just getting acclimated. Kind of goes hand in hand. If I'm gonna be here, I might as well, just be out here. So being able to get with Todd, who was able to just be one of the top trainers in the NFL, and being able to get me on track and where I need to be, being able to rehab with Caleb, another guy who's rehabbing his ACL, and just being able to push each other and stuff like that. But being able to, like I said, it's my first year with the team, being able to pick up this offense as fast as I can, since I'm not being able to be out there fully. So when I am ready to go, I'm ready to have that knowledge of the offense and just be able to go full speed by then.
What's it like mentally, maybe when you're coming back from an ACL, building confidence, and where do you feel like you are from a confidence standpoint, like making cuts, doing things where you're feeling like, hey, this is feeling good?
You gotta try. I feel like you gotta do it to have that confidence, and I feel like we're able to do these things at slower speeds and being able to build up as I go. And I think that's really the start of it, being able to do these things in a jog through period, in an individual period with Rob. I feel like that's the kind of stuff that allows me to have confidence and being able to pick it up. And as we get to go full speed, as I already made these cuts at a certain level, and as we start picking up the speeds, I feel like it just comes from being able to do the drills and then translate it to the field.
So that's Robert Woods meeting with the media yesterday. And I would say that's been the biggest takeaway for me so far of all the different things that we've seen out on the practice field is that Robert Woods is closer to ready than not. Now, Puka on YouTube brings up, I just hope Woods not doing too much too soon. Here's the thing that I would say about that is, ideally you don't want him to overextend himself, right? In the same way that we've talked about with Taylor Lewan and Bud Dupree. But overextending himself and getting work in and kind of testing the limits of his body and specifically his surgically repaired knee on June the 2nd is much different than him doing it on September the 2nd, right? It's a much more accelerated process and much further along than you would say Taylor Lewan or Bud Dupree was at this point in their offseason last year. So, yes, you hope that he's not doing too much. You hope that he doesn't overextend or overexert himself that would cause any kind of a setback. But if such things were to happen, you would look at this and say, okay, preferably on June the 2nd as opposed to August the 2nd when training camp is kind of in the middle of things and preseason has started. I don't expect to see him play in the preseason, but maybe he'd like to get some reps. I don't know how he's going to want to approach this. I didn't expect him to be out there to begin with. But it does take a significant amount of pressure off Treylon Burks right now. But here's the thing, because while that is positive, that's a good development for Titans fans who are just looking for somebody to emerge from this new look wide receiver group. You are placing a lot, to use a cliche, you are placing a lot of eggs in the basket of another injured player, right? And that's something that Steve Lehman, John Burton, and myself talked about on the 615 Sessions podcast, which will be in your podcast feed and on this YouTube channel tomorrow morning for your drive to work. So make sure that you check that out in the A to Z Sports podcast network feed. Reed just made a face, which means that I have surprised him by telling him that it's going to be available to people by Monday, which means that I need to get him the rest of the podcast or by Friday morning. So I can allow him to set him up for success rather than just surprising him in the middle of this, because he made a face at me behind the scenes that would indicate that he was not prepared for that, but that's okay. We'll get it figured out. I sure hope Tim Kelly can help Todd Downing improve the whole offensive scheme. We talked about that yesterday at great length, so you can listen to why, or you can read why I think that Tim Kelly is going to be a perfect fit. Sam Cardenas on Facebook Live asks, which wide receiver is looking great out there? Well, I mean, great is a relative term. I wouldn't say that I've been like outright blown away by anybody, right, Sam? And that's kind of how I expected the wide receiver core to look. I don't have high expectations for this group just generally. You guys know how I feel about what they did in the offseason. I do like Robert Woods as a player. I do like Treylon Burks as a player, and we'll see what happens with his conditioning and all these different things as the offseason continues. I do like Kyle Phillips. I do like Chigga Okonkwo. I think that Austin Hooper is better than any tight end they had on the roster last year. And I still don't think they're a better football team on the offensive side of the football. I still don't think that they are, from a talent perspective, substantially improved from the group that took the field last year. Now, what we know about the group that took the field last year is that it was hardly ever one consistent group, right? Where you were rotating wide receivers in or out of the lineup, offensive linemen in and out of the lineup. Really, the only consistent thing on the offensive side of the football was the quarterback. And the quarterback, because everything kept changing around him, struggled more than we are accustomed to seeing him struggle. But yeah, I'm not overwhelmingly high on the Titans wide receiver group right now. And I don't think that's any stinging indictment. I just think it's realistic. So when you're asking me who look great, I don't think any of them look great yet. But there's time for that to change, and it's only June, and they don't play football until September the 11th. So we have time for that to be a different conversation by the time the season is ready to roll around versus where we are right now in just the early OTAs phase. But yeah, I think you guys, the Titans says, think positive, Buck. Well, I mean, here's my thing. It's not my time. It's not my job to think positively. It's my job to give you a realistic assessment. And my realistic assessment is, I don't think they're a better football team right now on the offensive side of the football. But, we'll see. And we probably won't know. Honestly, we probably won't know if they're a better looking offensive football team, if they're a collectively better group offensively until like October. And I'm fully prepared for that because, I want to see them play a couple of games before I say, yes, make any grand indictments off of week one against the New York Giants, when we all know that week one is a pretty mutated sample size. It's probably the weirdest result of football in the league, around the league, is what happens in week one. Being better than last year offensively is a low bar and easily doable, says Cody Holzer. Well, no, not necessarily so, Cody. You're mistaken in that way. It was still a top 10 red zone offense. It was still I think it was a top 5 goal to go offense. They were top 10 as far as third down conversion percentage was concerned, and they were still one of the better offenses in football last year. Now, because of the way that your offense did not step up when you needed it to in the playoffs against the Cincinnati Bengals, you probably feel different. That's recency bias. But yeah, it's not like the 2020 defense, where the 2020 defense was historically bad. No, this was the top 10 offense in most metrics. It just it wasn't literally record setting the way that the 2020 offense was. And certainly had a much higher floor than the 2020 defense did, right? That was my whole thing coming into last offseason. Todd Downing was always going to be under significantly more scrutiny because Arthur Smith had just coordinated the best offense in Titans era football history, and Shane Bowen's defense was hot trash. So Shane Bowen was working with house money, and Todd Downing was going to be the guy who was looked at if it didn't step up and gets hit over the head with things like Cody Holzer's providing, where he says being better than last year offensively is a low bar and easily doable. Well, no, of course that's not at all the case. In fact, that's completely unrealistic based on where they finished in most metrics, both statistically and from an advanced metric standpoint. They were an above average offense in 2021. But most of that was on the ground, correct? Why would the run game be any different? Well, most of what was on the ground. just the offense. I mean, yeah, their offense it's a running offense. And where they did take a dip is explosive plays. Now, why they took a dip in explosive plays, if that was because the offensive line couldn't pass protect, that was because the personnel didn't know the proper route combinations, i.e. the Houston Texans game and Des Fitzpatrick running incorrect routes and causing Tannehill to throw interceptions, whether that's, miscommunications like in the Pittsburgh Steelers game where they had a touchdown, a 70-yard bomb drawn up to Julio Jones. You could see the play playing out. And all of a sudden, Aaron Brewer and Dontrell Hilliard whiff on the protection. And instead of a 70-yard touchdown on the first play of the Steelers game, it's a sack that results in a loss of 8. So there's a lot of different, they had missed opportunities in the passing game, sure. And their explosive plays were very non-existent. That dried up. You could stand to be better from an explosive plays standpoint. But yeah, everywhere else as far as scoring, all the things that you look at for the measures of a quote-unquote good offense, they were a fine offense last year. But it wasn't record-setting the way that you expected it to be, especially given the personnel changes and additions that you made and the guys that you had coming back. And so you were left to feel disappointed. I understand why. It's also completely unrealistic to say they couldn't get any worse. No, that's they could get substantially worse. And in fact, I expect them to look worse early in the season because it's a whole different group of personnel. It's not like defense where you can change out the talent, upgrade the talent immediately, and just have them tee off on a quarterback, rush and cover, right? As we learn new concepts, as people figure out different defensive schemes and disguises. Well, what can you do on defense? Well, you can rush the quarterback and you can cover the receivers. Offense is much different. Offense is much more difficult to kind of coalesce. And I would expect early on in the season for this offense to look sluggish and to look slow out of the gate and to look not necessarily fluid until we probably get, as I said, a month or a month and a half, ideally, into the season, I think, for this point. So I think that there's a lot of pressure on Treylon Burks. I think that Robert Woods' availability makes that easier. I also think that for Titans fans to put a lot of optimism in a player who's coming off an ACL tear, you may be setting yourself up for failure to a certain extent. Philip Seabury says, thinking the offensive line room needs more help than the wide receiver room. Not sure if there's anyone left out there looking for. Maybe I'm wrong. Anyone that can give me a name or two? Sure, Philip. I think that Eric Flowers or Will Fuller on the offensive line group or the wide receiver room would both help the football team be better. And I expect neither of those players to be Titans. I don't. This June. So now we officially have the $9.5 million available for from the Julio Jones release post June 1st designation. And I think a lot of you guys may be expecting a lot of people may be expecting some kind of, free agency, post-draft free agency push or things of that nature. And I would say to you, you're going to use that money for practice squad. 16 practice squad players going to eat up a bunch of money, a couple $1 million. You're talking about at least 3 of the draft picks who still have to sign their contracts. That's going to eat up a couple mil. You're talking about practice squad, as we've discussed, and in a pool of money for injured players, which will require a couple $1 million. And you only had 9.5, really 8.5 to play with right now. So Mark says the cap can be manipulated. Sure, it can be. Plenty of teams can do that. Plenty of teams could do that. Plenty of teams do that. Titans aren't one that I expect to see that happen with. So, you guys can take that as an informed opinion, not reporting anything outright, but I don't expect to see them have some kind of June spending spree just because they have this Julio Jones money. This money is necessary for them to kind of, basically have it. It's their piggy bank money that they're just getting back now with the cap coming back into focus for them. So yeah, cap can be manipulated. Doesn't mean that John Robinson likes to manipulate the cap. He'd rather just kind of move forward with what he's got if it's good enough. Let's see. Titans 42, Giants 9, says Titans South. Honestly, if I had to make one prediction all year long, I bet the Titans lose to the Giants. I really do. It's just, it's such a, it would be such a, and you guys know what I think of predictions, and they mean absolutely nothing, and prognostications and all these different things. I don't do record predictions. I don't do score predictions. I don't do any of that shit because it's useless. But it's such a Titans thing to do, to host the 9/11 game on national television against the New York Giants. American flags everywhere. I'm certain, big CBS afternoon game for sure, and at home, and the crowd will be excited, and we'll see how all these things go. And then they'll probably end up losing to the New York Giants, because of course they shouldn't lose to the New York Giants. And it's Aaron Hobson Sr. says it's the Titans way. Listen, I don't make the rules on this, but it absolutely is there. It is in their DNA to blow a game like that, even against, Daniel Jones. We were talking today on the radio about, we were looking at a numbers comparison between Arthur Smith and Todd Downing. And I had a caller bring up the Carolina Panthers game in 2019, because that was kind of the turning point for Arthur Smith in that offense. I think that was like week 9 or 10 into the regular season. And that was a game that they did figure out the offense in the second half of that game, but because they fiddle, I can't use the word, but they screwed around in the first half against the Carolina Panthers, that they lost the game to Kyle Allen, right? Like, Kyle Allen stinks. Kyle Allen was the backup quarterback. I think he was the third string quarterback because Cam was hurt that year. I think Taylor Heineke was the backup and Kyle Allen the third string, or maybe Kyle Allen was the backup and Taylor Heineke was the third string. Either way, like, the Titans lost that game, as only the Tennessee Titans could, to a player like Kyle Allen, where you looked around and said, "Oh my God, like how did this happen again? How do they always do this?" Captain Trips says Derrick Henry destroyed the Giants last time they played. Buck, come on, it's 2 years ago. No, that's 2019. That's 3 years ago at this point. It's a totally different roster. I mean, Daniel Jones is still there as the quarterback, and Saquon Barkley still the running back. In fact, did Saquon play in that game? I remember that was at New York. I remember Logan Ryan snapped his leg, and they didn't end up winning. It was a terrible game in the rain, just a brutal watch. But to act like the result from 3 years ago is any relevance on week 1 of the 2022 season, well, that's completely stupid. It's got absolutely nothing to do with the last time the Titans played the Giants. The coaching staff is different. The personnel is different. And the circumstance will be different for both teams, for certain. But, like I said, I don't do predictions. I think they're dumb. But if you had to ask me one game on the schedule where I'd look at it and say, where would the Titans step on their feet right out of the gate, I would say 1,000% it's that New York Giants game, because it screams typical Titans stuff. But, for your sake and for the sake of your mental health, I hope that it doesn't happen to you that way, to you and your football team. But, selfishly, I must admit that it would make my job a hell of a lot easier if they did blow that game right out of the gate. So I can't say I don't root for or against, but I would say that for me, them losing to the Giants would be the best possible result, because you guys would shit your pants. And that, right or wrong, that's good for sports media. Anyway, so there was a report today that Nashville is one of 6 cities in consideration for a WNBA team at this point. And I think Jimbo says, why would that be the best thing for you? Okay, so I'm always transparent about this thing, and about this kind of stuff, and I think I've talked about this before, Jimbo, but maybe you haven't heard it. Yeah, when there's disaster, it's better for sports media because it's reaction. It's better content, it's better conversation. You can be more reactive as opposed to saying, okay, the Titans won this football game. Good job out of Ryan Tannehill, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Good job out of Derrick Henry. Like, no, it's better for you to go scorched earth in my position, and for you guys to go scorched earth. Because of course, if you lost to the Giants, you'd lose your minds. And then, the phone lines would light up. We'd have 400 people watching live in the comment section, all screaming about Todd Downing, Ryan Tannehill, Derrick Henry, or all these other things. So yeah, I mean, in full transparency, it is better to cover successful teams for sure. I would much rather cover a winning team than a losing team. But if you're asking for my honest, media perspective, what is best for business? What's best for business is for you to sprinkle a little disaster into the middle. Well, not you specifically, but for the team and the results, to sprinkle a little disaster on what otherwise may be an ultimately successful thing, because then that's the way that you get the most reaction. Now, so that's what I would tell you. I root what's best for the show, and what's best for the show would be for the Titans to lose that game, to be completely honest with you. But we can cross that bridge when we come to it. Mark Jones just says, "F the media." Oh goodness, yeah. I totally get why that would piss fans off, but I mean, that's the truth. That's just kind of the nature of the business. Why do you think the first time that that the Tennessee Titans lead Sports Center is because of Ryan Tannehill and Malik Willis? Because it's controversy. That's how it goes. Penny says Bucks gotta go. LOL. Hey man, I understand. I understand why that would bother some of you, but at least I'm honest about it. Maybe people aren't as transparent about it as the rest, as we are as a show. But I've always tried to be honest with you guys. So anytime I tell you what I'm rooting for, I'm always rooting for me in those moments, and what's best for me and what's best for the show. And what's best for the show is a little bit of disaster, and ultimately a winning football team. Rather cover a winning football team. See, B French says it spot on the nose. You mean like last year against the Cardinals? Exactly. Mwah, chef's kiss. Perfect for sports content and conversation. Not best for the team, not best for the fans, but if you're talking about like what I do for a living, yeah, it's incredible. That could not have, for them to win week one and for them to win comfortably, it would have been a much less interesting conversation than, oh my God, the defense that they retooled just absolutely got dummied by Kyler Murray over the course of 4 quarters. And oh my God, Taylor Lewan gave up 3 sacks. And oh my God, Chandler Jones himself had 5 sacks against this defense, and all these different things. But you don't want too much disaster, right? You don't want too much disaster, because then I lose you guys. Right. It's like Vols fans. When Tennessee lost to Georgia State, good for business. When Tennessee lost to Georgia State and BYU in back-to-back weeks, terrible for business. Because then Vols fans start to check out 2 games into the season, and I'm like, I've got a full college football season to talk about, and the only team that most of you care about is the Tennessee Volunteers. So I don't want you to check out. But, I'd be lying to you if I said that an occasional result wouldn't, that ruffles your feathers isn't ultimately better for me. Anyway, let's move on and let's talk about the WNBA coming to Nashville, potentially coming to Nashville, let me say. It's being explored, according to The Athletic, that Nashville is one of 6 cities in contention for a possible WNBA expansion. They're exploring 1 or 2 expansion franchises, and Nashville is one of the 6 cities. Titan says, just pretend you care about us. But no, listen, I love you guys. I really do. Listen, there's no me without you. Okay. They're totally there is zero. I don't have anything. What else am I going to do? Who am I going to talk to without you guys for an hour, Sunday through Thursday night, and 3 hours on the radio show? Reed is pointing at himself, and I love Reed, but not that much. I do care about you guys, but also, like I said, I'm rooting for the success of the show. And the success of the show is for, you guys to be bent out of shape every once in a while. That'll make the rules. Okay. WNBA. Would you rather have a WNBA team or a baseball team? Major League Baseball or WNBA in Nashville? Let me know on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. We'll talk about it together. That news broke in the middle of my radio show. We're going to play you a clip from the radio show earlier today. What would you prefer to have, WNBA or MLB? Give me your response on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch, and we will discuss it at length right after I tell you about the people who can make your dream address without the stress possible. That is the Ashton Real Estate Group of RE/MAX Advantage at GaryAshton.com. Your dream address without the stress. That's what the Ashton team can provide to you, and the intel edge that you need to succeed in this red-hot Nashville real estate market. GaryAshton.com, as the official real estate agent of the Nashville Predators and of me, can do that exact thing for you. Help you sell your home without any showings or staging. Help you capitalize on your home equity. Help you find your next home while you sell your current one and take advantage of this incredible Nashville real estate market. GaryAshton.com and the Ashton Real Estate Group of RE/MAX Advantage can do all of those things to you. So get the best in the business. Get with Gary Ashton and his team at GaryAshton.com. So, WNBA or baseball, let me know on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. Old ass baseball, says William Jones. We need an NBA team here to compete with the Grizzlies. Yeah, they're not going to put two NBA franchises in the state of Tennessee. There's not near enough. People don't care about the vast majority of people. I'm with you, William. I'd love an NBA team. I'd rather the Grizzlies be here than the Preds, just transparently, because of, I like baseball, or I like basketball better than I like hockey. I mean, I like basketball better than I like football, but that's my sports fan opinion. I like football just fine, but like, if you're asking me which sport I like more, I like basketball more than anything. Now, I think that Tennessee as a market is not it's not New York, it's not Florida, it's not Los Angeles. You can't put two NBA teams, one of which in the Grizzlies already doesn't do great ratings anyway, other than the fact that they have Ja, and that the NBA is clearly pushing the marketing machine behind Ja Morant. I think that there's positive signs for the Grizzlies ultimately, but the WNBA, I think, in Nashville would do well. There's not a state in the country that I think would support women's basketball with greater effort and energy than the state of Tennessee, because it's entrenched in our DNA as a state. Going back to Pat Summitt and the Lady Vols and all of the dominance across decades that program had. Now, they also had an incredibly iconic coach, and they were out there killing teams, right? There has been few things like Pat Summitt and the Lady Vols at the peak of their powers, few things like that run. There's no guaranteeing that would be successful with the WNBA in the same way that the Lady Vols, why people love the Lady Vols. Tennessee fans are always going to support things in great mass, and this would be a new team with a new fan base and not necessarily attached to the Lady Vols. And also, a thing that comes to mind with the WNBA is they're very outspoken as far as political stances, and that's not something that just, to be completely transparent, that a lot of people in the state of Tennessee would tolerate, which, you can think that wrong or right or indifferent as far as that's concerned. But women, in the same way that the U.S. women's soccer team is hugely polarizing, I think unnecessarily. Not that I think what they do is unnecessary. I think that people having such strong opinions about women who stand up for themselves is completely unnecessary. I think that if a WNBA franchise were to do that in the state of Tennessee, it would not be received well. I think just on principle, for the same reason that Colin Kaepernick wasn't received well here, for the same reason that the Titans and the Seahawks staying in the locker room during the whole Kaepernick situation that would have been the 2017 season wasn't received well. Like, that's just kind of, that's kind of the political atmosphere that we live in the state of Tennessee, right, wrong, or indifferent. But I do think that personally, I would prefer a basketball team, men's or women's, over a baseball team. Because I'll be honest with you, I don't give a damn about baseball. Baseball is so boring to me. I think that baseball has more fun and marketable stars in the last couple of years than they ever have. I think Shohei Ohtani and Vlad Guerrero Jr. and Ronald Acuna. And there's a bunch of fun, marketable stars in baseball right now. So I'm as close to being interested in baseball as I've ever been. But also, like, just the sport in general, I think soccer is going to overtake Major League Baseball in the future as far as where the vast majority of people's interests lie. It's just not something that appeals to me. And again, if the stadium was downtown, if the MLB stadium was downtown, I'd be game for that. But It won't be because the Titans own that land. Well, I guess PSC Metals doesn't own that junkyard anymore, but there are still basically that land where the junkyard is next door to Nissan Stadium on the east bank of the river is still controlled by somebody who's not the baseball team, right? So they wouldn't be able to build it anywhere downtown theoretically, and unless it was downtown, like I'm not gonna drive to Brentwood to go watch a baseball game. You know what I'm saying? Like I'd rather just go get drunk at the bandbox, which in Germantown, which is literally, I mean, I'm a half mile from the Sound Stadium right now. I'd rather do that than schlep out to Williamson County if they're going to build a baseball stadium out there the way that they did with Atlanta and the Braves and the Battery outside of Atlanta. I think that basketball, I think that women's basketball, if it had any chance to succeed, it would be able to succeed here because of the passion that Tennessee sports fans already have for women's basketball that's basically ingrained in their DNA. We've hosted the women's Final Four here in Nashville with great success. It sold out, as Puka correctly notes on YouTube. So I do think it would. I do think it would be a hugely successful endeavor as long as the team was good, right? And there's no guarantee. Like soccer got, I don't want to say lucky because they did well to put together a winning team, but soccer benefits from the fact that they're good. People want to go to Nashville SC matches because they're good and because the stadium's new and because it's an experience, right? I mean, the WNBA team would in all likelihood play at Bridgestone Arena, and they would have to split nights with the Preds and all these different things. So it would not necessarily be a new experience other than it would be a new professional team playing in Nashville. I think baseball is incredibly boring. I think that basketball in general is something that I would favor over any kind of baseball. So, that's where my opinion lies. But, you may feel differently about these things. I'm sure most of you would rather have baseball than women's basketball. And that's okay. I just, I respectfully disagree. Okay, let's do I forgot to play the video. I'm an idiot. I talked to Ron Slay about this. Reed's laughing at me. We talked about this on the radio show today. Ron Slay, who played, of course, for the University of Tennessee and professionally both in the United States and in Europe for several years, and who I happen to work with on 104.5 The Zone. Ron Slay was in studio when this news broke, and I thought we had a pretty good discussion about it. But I want to start with this little bit of news that we had here, Slay, because people are screaming at me. I said I'd rather have a WNBA team in Nashville than baseball. Mm-hmm. I said this because I don't give a damn about baseball. Yeah. And I love basketball. Right. I don't care if they like baseball more than they like basketball. I'm speaking for me. Right. When you hear the news that the WNBA is considering one or two potential expansion teams, and Nashville is one of the 6 cities being considered, how does that land with you?
Man, listen, man. As far as the city in Nashville, outside of the south side of Nashville, when we talking about just inner city Nashville, yeah, outside of South Nashville, nobody grew up playing baseball. You know what I'm saying? In my era. Now, I think as I get older, it's more and more happening, you know what I mean, because of what you were saying, Will, Mookie Betts, and everybody bringing more attention to it and bringing light, the minorities, you know what I mean, being a little bit more celebrated. So that's one aspect of it. But baseball, man, I'm cool on that. But I do know one thing for sure, and I'm not even speaking about men's basketball, which I'm more biased to, but women's basketball here in this, and I ain't even talking about the city now. I'm talking about in the state of Tennessee.
Absolutely. Thrives.
Hey, man, when I say a hotbed, when you go on the map and recruiters go on and get their map mapped out of where they're going to go during the summer, Tennessee, it has to be in top 3. It has to be. I'm talking about all the nation. You know what I'm saying? Of course, it's reaching to Europe now, but in all of the nation, this has been a hotbed ever since I was a baby. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? From Tennessee State to Vanderbilt to Belmonts, all these UTC, when they were UTC, not just Chattanooga, like all the way down to Memphis. It's been a hotbed. You could come here as a recruiter, a college coach, and point. Close your eyes and point to a public school, private school, it didn't matter. This has always been a hotbed for women's basketball.
Yeah, Slay's spot on. And I think, more people grow up playing baseball than soccer, for example. But those numbers have been in steady decline, and soccer's numbers have been on the rise. Lady Vols may be enough, Mark Jones says. And I don't disagree, right? If the Lady Vols are a better basketball team than if we were to get, the Nashville Woo Girls or whatever you would call them, if they're going to play on Lower Broadway, I think that yeah, if the team is bad, then people won't care about it, and it will go the way that the Preds did early on, where there was almost a point where we lost the Nashville Predators for the lack of interest that they had and the lack of success that they were having on the ice, famously. But if it's any kind of basketball versus baseball, I'm always going to choose basketball because baseball is just there's just nothing there for me. Anyway, that's the show. That's going to do it for us this week on the Primetime Show. Thank you guys, as always, for spending your evening with us. We'll be back on Sunday night, certainly, and we'll have a great time. Radio show tomorrow is going to be a lot of fun. Coach Dave McGinnis of Tennessee Titans Radio will be on the show, and we'll talk about some OTA stuff. And I've got some Julio Jones stuff for you, or Julio Jones money stuff for you as well. Have a great evening. See you on Sunday night if I don't talk to you on the radio show tomorrow at 10 a.m.